Today marks 34 years since George Graham's first match in charge of Arsenal against Manchester United. In this video I'm just going to look back on that match and the impact that he had on the club. Hello and welcome back to my channel over and over again, which of course features everything to do with Arsenal. In this video I just really wanted to look back on the 34th anniversary, which happens to be today, of the first match that George Graham took charge of the club against Manchester United at Highbury. Just before I get into that, I just want to make sure that you've all subscribed to the channel. If you like the content that I'm doing, I say please subscribe, please like and share it, and please click on the bell as well to get notifications every time I produce a new video. I'm trying to add some new content in regularly at the moment, and also I've got some more live shows planned with some special guests as well, which is going to be exciting, and that of course follows on from my first live show last week, which of course featured Mark Flats. So I say please subscribe to the channel to help me grow, and everyone, I'd just like to thank everyone who's supported the channel so far. It's very much appreciated, and I hope you continue to enjoy the content. So I'll say this video today, I just want to look back at this game, 23rd of August 1986. Of course it was George Graham's first match in charge. Now just a little brief recap on where we were at that particular time. Don Howe of course had been manager for the previous couple of years. He'd resigned back in March after the club had approached Terry Venables for the job. He felt as though that was out of order going behind his back, and rightly so, and he resigned. And of course Terry Venables didn't end up even getting offered the job, I don't believe. So now the club at the time were in a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a crisis so much, but we were treading water. The previous two seasons we'd finished 7th, the season before that we'd finished 6th. We had quite a number of high profile players that maybe were reaching the end of their career, seemed to be going through the motions a little bit. Hang on a minute, that sounds quite familiar, doesn't it? Anyway, so George Graham was appointed. Now he wasn't actually the first choice. If you remember, Johan Cruyff had actually been mentioned, but the main target was Alex Ferguson, who of course at that time was manager of Aberdeen up in Scotland. Had a lot of success there. He'd won the European Cup, didn't he, with them a couple of years before, and several league titles, and he was probably one of the most highly regarded managers at the time. Now the reason why he turned the job down was because of his commitments to the Scotland national team. Jock Stein had died the year before, and he had kind of taken on the role on a temporary basis, but he felt as though he wasn't able to commit to the pressures of a job in England at that particular time with his commitments to Scotland. So he turned the job down. Now, it's a case of what might have been, in a sense, isn't it? Because the success that Ferguson would later have at Manchester United, and it was of course only a few months later, November 1986, that of course he took over at Manchester United. But I don't think any of us can really have too many complaints about the appointment of George Graham in the end, and the success that of course he brought the club. Now at that particular time he had been manager of Millwall, and he'd done a good job, and he'd actually laid the foundations there for the team that would eventually get promoted to the first division for the first time in their history in 1988, and a lot of that was players that the team that he had built, really. So it had, he'd had a lot of success at that level, but of course he hadn't had any experience of managing in the first division at the top level. Now of course he had been a former Arsenal player in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Of course he played in the team that won the Fairs Cup in 1970, and he was a big part of course of the double team from 1971. Scored a lot of important goals that season as well. Now he had the nickname Stroller because of his laid back attitude, but he was a very elegant player. In fact he was a very elegant man off the pitch as well, in terms of the way he dressed and everything like that. So for him to have been, he wasn't really considered to be a candidate for a manager while he was a player, but clearly he has a lot more determination about him than he maybe appeared sometimes on the pitch. Now when he first came into the club, it wasn't really like it is nowadays, where he didn't come in and start spending lots of money in the transfer market. In fact he didn't buy anybody at all that first summer, and a few players got released. A young defender, Martin Keown, who'd come through the academy, played a few games the season before. He turned down a contract he was offered, and he was moved on to Everton, I think it was. And also as well, a couple of the more senior players were released as well, Paul Mariner and Tony Woodcock. Paul Mariner hadn't really been much of a success at Arsenal. He'd come late in his career after being a big star at Ipswich. Tony Woodcock had actually had a reasonably good career at Arsenal, certainly for the first couple of years. He then got a serious injury, never really recovered from that, and they were looked upon as being maybe a bad influence, I suppose. So the first thing George did was get rid of them. Now, for that first game of the season against Manchester United, say the 23rd of August 1986, it seems ironic in a way, doesn't it? Or maybe it seems quite appropriate, maybe, that it was Manchester United that we faced, because to me, that game and that season was the start of our modern era of success. And of course, the success that we've enjoyed since then all started from this particular game, this particular day. And I say Manchester United, of course, have been a big part of our history, haven't they, in terms of trophies that we've won. We battled against them, of course, for a number of years, didn't we? So I suppose it was a good way to start, wasn't it, Manchester United, as it turned out. Although, of course, back then, like us, they were a little bit of a sleeping giant, I suppose, although they'd won a couple of FA Cups in the previous couple of years. But our team that started that game, I say, because there was no new signings in, there was only actually 2 changes to the 11 that started the final game of the previous season, which had been a 3-0 defeat away to Oxford. I mean, that's where we were at that particular time, losing 3-0 at Oxford. That's where George Graham had come in at that point. That's where we were. So the team that started was actually, it wasn't a bad side if you look at it. In goal, John Lukic, of course, we had some great success at the club. We had 2 really good fullbacks, actually. The 2 England internationals, Kenny Sansom on the left and Viv Anderson on the right. And in the centre of defence, the experienced David O'Leary had already had a long career at Arsenal, and alongside him was young Tony Adams, 19 years old, very raw. He broke through a little bit over the previous couple of seasons, but George Graham put a lot of faith in him right from the start. Started him in this game, and that completed the back 4. Now, across the midfield, in centre midfield, you had Paul Davies and Stuart Robson, again 2 players that had come through our youth system. Paul Davies, a lot more experience. Stuart Robson had been playing quite well actually in the previous couple of seasons, so that was a decent enough midfield pairing. And then in the wide positions, you had David Rocastle. He was one of the changes from the end of the previous season. Young at the time, I think he was 19 as well, and he started on the right hand side. And the experienced Graham Ricks on the left. Of course, he's been at the club for a long time at that point, and again he had a pretty decent Arsenal career. Up front, there was of course Niall Quinn, who was the other change. He replaced Tony Woodcock. Again, a young lad who made his breakthrough the season before, and partnering him was of course fans' favourite Charlie Nicholas. Now, that team, of course, I say, had underperformed the season before, but what George did was he put his faith in a lot of these young players, kept faith in them, gave them a run in the team, and of course as well he started working on the defensive shape as well. We'd conceded far too many goals previously, and that was the first thing that he decided needed to be improved, which he was right about. Now, that game, the Manchester United game, anybody that was there will remember that it wasn't a particularly spectacular game. It wasn't a great performance by Arsenal necessarily, and it certainly wasn't a performance that made you stand up and think, you know what, this is going to be the start of a great era. We did win the game 1-0. It was a late goal in the second half, scored by Charlie Nicholas in front of the North Bank. And so we went home reasonably satisfied. Winning the first game of the season is always nice. A win against Manchester United is always nice. So it was an encouraging start, even if the performance wasn't great. But after that, we did struggle a little bit for goals, and it was obvious that the squad wasn't strong enough to sustain a challenge. Although we did have a good run, and of course, that particular season, of course, would end with our first trophy for 8 years, wouldn't it? When we won the Littlewoods Cup, of course, beating Tottenham in the semi-final, coming from behind, and then beating Liverpool in the final at Wembley, again coming from behind. Now, that game was particularly important for me because it was the first time I'd actually seen us win a trophy sort of live in the stadium, so that was a big moment for me. So, but it also was a big moment for the club, I think, and for George. What it showed was that run in the Littlewoods Cup, that George was able to, he showed he was able to get results in the big games, something that we hadn't done for quite a number of years. And you could see the difference in the belief in the team, the structure, the defensive shape. We were a lot more solid. We didn't concede many goals. We were harder to beat, and we could win the big games when they mattered. And that was something that became a feature for George's whole Arsenal career as a manager. I mean, how many big games did we lose under George? Not many. When the chips were down, when we needed a result, most of the time George was able to produce one, wasn't he? And that to me was the legacy that he produced for the club. It does seem, doesn't it, as I mentioned before, quite a lot of similarities with where the club were at the time he took over and his initial impact. Very, very similar to the current situation that we've experienced with Mikel Arteta and also with the current team. So let's hope that Arteta currently can go on and have similar success. Of course, he's already won one trophy, as did George in his first season. It took George Graham, if you remember, another season to get the players in that he wanted, rebuild the defence, built the famous back five, get other players in that he wanted, Alan Smith for example, Brian Marwood and people like that, and he built a team that would go on to win the league in 1989. Now, can Arteta do a similar thing from a similar position? I don't see why not, and certainly the encouraging signs for me are that Arteta's put in place the same improvements that George did. It looks like he's getting rid of a few senior players, if you like, that are unsettling to the team. He's improved the defensive shape and structure of the team, and of course he's won a trophy. So I can see the similarities there, and I just wanted to really highlight that in this video, really, of I say just on the anniversary of the day that George Graham took charge of his first match. So that's that video there. I hope you enjoyed that. Maybe brought back a few memories of a bygone era, if you like. Of course, football's changed a lot, hasn't it, since 1986, far more than we could ever have imagined back then. Not always for the better, we have to be honest, although in some ways I suppose it has improved, but fans of a certain age such as myself, I think we still miss those days and football as it was, turning up on the day, paying on the gate, all that kind of stuff. But it's changed, and that's the way it is. But I hope that brought back a few memories of the start of what I believe was the start of our modern era of success. Of course, George Graham, in the end, he actually managed the club for 460 games, 225 wins, 133 draws, 102 defeats. We scored 771 goals in those 460 games, conceded 403. So that shows his legacy there defensively. Good defensive record. Of course, he won 2 league titles, 1 FA Cup, 2 League Cups, and only our second ever European trophy, the Cup Winners' Cup. So that's 6 trophies in what was 8 seasons that he was there. So brilliant success, and I say that was for me the start of this modern era of success. I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. As I said, I'm trying to grow it. It's really important to get people to subscribe, so please subscribe. Please tell your friends if you enjoy it. Please leave some comments as well if you remember that particular game against Manchester United, and just comments about George Graham in general. I mean, I think we all loved him, didn't we, in the end, what he gave us. I know he left under a bit of a cloud, but that's maybe a video for another time. Coming up soon, I've got another live show. I've got another couple of live shows booked, actually. A couple of special guests. I'm not going to release too many more details about that quite yet, but I will be in the next few days. But that's all coming up soon, so stay sort of tuned to the channel for that. I say click the notification bell as well, so you can see when I release some new videos. And that's it for this particular video. Now, we're still waiting for some transfer news, aren't we? So we're trying to fill some time up before we start getting into that, hopefully this week. And of course, it's the Community Shield, isn't it, this weekend? So I'll be looking at a preview of that game coming up probably later in the week as well. Looking at that game against Liverpool at Wembley, of course, on Saturday. So stay tuned for that as well. And of course, in the meantime, as always, come on you guys.